All right, today we are diving into a really bold attempt to create a scientific map for human personality. This comes to us from the psychologist Hans Eysenck. You see, he believed that our inner worlds aren't just random, and what he came up with, well, it's pretty fascinating. So let's just jump right in with the big question that was at the heart of Eysenck's work. Are we born with our personalities? Are they hardwired from the get-go, or are we mostly shaped by our life experiences? Eysenck didn't just have an opinion on this, he had a bold and very biological answer. You know, Hans Eysenck looked at personality not as some mysterious, random collection of quirks, but as a system. He argued that its foundations were fundamentally biological, something we're basically born with, and that it could all be mapped out in a really clear, organized way. He pictured personality almost like a pyramid. At the very bottom, at the foundation, are our biological systems, things like our genetics and our brain chemistry. He believed these systems are the engine that drives everything else, from our tiniest actions to our big, overarching personality types. So let's see how he built that structure. Okay, so let's start at the top of that pyramid. Eysenck identified three fundamental dimensions, what he called superfactors, that he believed could basically map out the entire landscape of human personality. This whole framework is often just called the Penn model. The first dimension is probably the one you've heard of the most, extraversion versus introversion. Now, this isn't just about being the life of the party or being a wallflower. It's a whole spectrum that measures how much we seek out social interaction, act on impulse, and really crave excitement. Next up is neuroticism versus stability. Think of this one as our emotional thermostat. Someone who scores high in neuroticism tends to experience more anxiety, more mood swings, and a lot of worry. On the other hand, someone on the stable end is typically much more calm and even-tempered. Now, the third dimension has a bit of a challenging name, psychoticism. It's really important to know this does not refer to clinical psychosis. Instead, it's a spectrum. High psychoticism is linked to traits like being more hostile and having a lack of empathy. The opposite end, which Eysenck called superego strength, is all about empathy, cooperation, and fitting in with social norms. So to kind of put it all together, you can see the extremes of each dimension right here. A high score in extroversion, super sociable, optimistic. A high score in neuroticism, much more anxious and moody. And someone high in psychoticism tends to be more hostile and uncooperative, with the low scores showing, well, pretty much the opposite traits. But how in the world do we get to these big, broad superfactors? I mean, Eysenck didn't just pull them out of thin air. He proposed a very clear hierarchy, a pyramid, that builds our personality right from the smallest, most specific actions all the way to the top. Think about it like you're building a house. At the very bottom, you've got your specific responses. These are the individual bricks, like, say, smiling at a stranger just one time. When you start laying those bricks over and over, you get a habitual response, which is like a wall. You smile at people regularly. Then, a bunch of related habits cluster together to form a trait, like sociability. That's a whole room in the house. And finally, a group of related traits makes up the overall type or superfactor, like extraversion. That's the entire architectural style of the building. And now we get to what might be the most groundbreaking part of Eysenck's theory, the why. He wasn't just satisfied with describing this personality pyramid. He wanted to find its biological foundation. And he started with that classic dimension, extraversion versus introversion. So Eysenck's big idea was this. The key difference between introverts and extroverts comes down to the brain's baseline level of stimulation. It's a concept called cortical arousal. Just think of it as your brain's natural buzz. Introverts, he said, are born with a high level of this internal buzz already going on. Extroverts, on the other hand, are born with a lower level, which can actually leave them feeling kind of understimulated. And this internal buzz is regulated by a part of the brainstem called the ascending reticular activating system, or just ARS. The easiest way to think about the ARS is as the brain's volume knob for any stimulation coming in. For introverts, that knob is already turned up high, so they tend to avoid intense situations, like a loud party to keep from getting overwhelmed. But for extroverts, that knob is set lower, so they actively go looking for that stimulation to get their brain to its optimal level of arousal. This quote from Eysenck himself just captures the whole idea perfectly. It's not that introverts are antisocial. It's that their brains are literally wired to be more sensitive to everything happening around them. Their behavior is all about managing stimulation, not necessarily about avoiding people. Need some proof? Okay, get this. The famous lemon drop test. It's so simple. When a few drops of lemon juice are placed on a person's tongue, introverts produce significantly more saliva than extroverts do. Why? Because their more sensitive brains are reacting more strongly to the exact same stimulus. It's just a simple, powerful way to see how two people can experience the same world in fundamentally different biological ways. It's amazing.
So, when we bring this all together, what Eysenck gave us was a model that connects our everyday behaviors all the way down to our fundamental biology.
So let's just quickly recap the three big takeaways here. First, personality can be mapped out across those three core dimensions in the Penn model. Second, this whole structure is a hierarchy, built up from our smallest actions to our broadest traits. And third, and this is the big one, these personality differences seem to have a real biological basis, rooted in our brain's innate level of arousal. And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. If Eysenck is right and our personality really does have these deep biological roots, what does that mean for personal growth? How much can we really change if the blueprint is already there? It's definitely something to chew on.